Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling off, like you somehow agreed to do something you didn't really want to do? Or worse, like you did something wrong, even though deep down, you know you didn't. If that sounds familiar, you may have just encountered one of the most subtle forms of manipulation. Emotional manipulation, when someone makes you feel responsible for their emotions. What makes it dangerous is that it rarely comes with yelling or threats. It hides in silence, in a sigh, in a look, in a phrase like, "If you really cared, you'd do this for me." Those words sound soft, even loving, but inside them is a leash made of guilt, quietly pulling you away from your own judgment. I remember an old friend of mine, Maya, a young, passionate manager. Every week she picked up her co-workers' extra tasks because she didn't want to disappoint anyone. And whenever she tried to say no, he'd sigh and say, "I thought we were a team." That one sentence, so casual, was enough to make her feel selfish if she refused. Until one Friday she paused, took a slow breath and said, "I understand, but I'll review it on Monday. I need to rest today." No anger, no guilt, just a boundary. And guess what? That urgent task vanished into thin air. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The Stoics believed emotions are signals, not commands. You can watch that wave of guilt rise and fall without letting it steer your ship. Here's a small practice I often share with my students. Whenever you feel pressured to act because someone will be upset, stop and ask yourself, does this align with my values? If the answer is no, then your answer should be no too. Calmly, without guilt. In an age where emotions are often used as tools of control, calmness is your sharpest weapon. Breathe deeply, slow down, and remember, you don't have to carry someone else's feelings to prove your love or your kindness. Because real love doesn't come from guilt, it comes from freedom, from both sides. Have you ever felt drained from trying to fix something or someone you can't control? Maybe it's a parent who never listens, a coworker who's always negative, or even the weather ruining a plan you've looked forward to for weeks. We live in a world that tells us to take control of your life, but few people remind us of this truth. Real freedom begins the moment you accept what's beyond your control. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was once a slave, said it best. Some things are up to us, and some are not. You can't control what others think, say, or do, but you can always control how you respond, and that's where peace begins. I once had a student who told me she was furious because her father refused to change no matter what she did. She said, "Professor, I've tried everything, but he's still the same." I asked her, if a storm is coming, do you shout at the clouds, or do you close the windows? She smiled, embarrassed, but she understood. You can't command the storm, but you can strengthen your home. Stoicism doesn't teach surrender, it teaches clarity, knowing where your true battlefield lies. Next time you're worried, try this exercise. Draw 2 columns, one titled, "What I Can Control," the other, "What I Can't." You'll notice the first column is much shorter, but it's also where your real strength lives. Marcus Aurelius said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." When you stop trying to control the world, you begin mastering yourself. And once you master yourself, the world outside, strangely enough, starts to feel lighter. Picture this. One morning, you step outside, and it's raining. You have 2 choices. You can curse the rain, or you can smile, open your umbrella, and keep walking. Both will get wet, but only one stays at peace. That's the essence of Stoicism. Happiness doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from accepting what you can't change with a calm heart. Have you ever walked out of a conversation and suddenly started doubting yourself? You remember exactly what happened, but someone looks you straight in the eye and says, "That never happened," or "You're imagining things." Little by little, you start questioning your memory, your feelings, even your sanity. That's gaslighting, a form of manipulation that makes you stop trusting your own reality. Gaslighting isn't always loud or obvious. It hides behind gentle words, polite smiles, and subtle tones that make you feel small. And the moment you start wondering, maybe it's my fault, that's when the manipulator has already stepped inside your mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every day, if it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it. To the Stoics, truth is the anchor of the mind. When others try to confuse you, return to that anchor. Trust what you know is real, not because you're stubborn, but because truth is the only foundation of inner freedom. I once had a student named Alex, a young professional in media. He confirmed a project deadline by email with his manager. A week later, his boss snapped, "I never agreed to that." For a second, Alex doubted himself. But then he opened the email, stayed calm, and said, "I understand. But here's our written confirmation from last week. No drama, no shouting, just quiet truth." That's what the Stoics call the power of awareness, the ability to stay clear even when someone else tries to fog your mind. Here's a simple practice. Keep a truth journal. After any important conversation, jot down 3 things: the event, what was said, and how you felt. Not to hold grudges, but to protect the line between memory and manipulation. Michelle Obama once said in an interview, "We had to learn how to argue honestly without rewriting the past." That's the Stoic way, not to win, but to stay true. Gaslighting only works when you stop trusting yourself. But when you stand firm on truth, no matter how others twist the mirror, the reflection you see remains whole. Truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs you to believe in it calmly, steadily, like a rock standing firm against the waves. Have you ever felt like the world is just too loud? The news, social media, endless debates where no one really listens. Even in your own head there's noise. What should I do next? What if that happens? Do they think badly of me? In times like this, silence isn't weakness, it's power. Seneca once wrote, "When the mind is at peace, no enemy can touch you." That's not a metaphor. Because when you're quiet inside, the noise outside loses its grip. The Stoics saw calmness as a fortress not built of steel, but of self-control. I remember once during a lecture, a man stood up and said harshly, "Your philosophy is just theory, it's not practical." The room went silent. Everyone waited for my response. But instead of defending myself, I smiled, took a deep breath and said, "You may be right in some ways. I'm still learning to live what I teach." And just like that, the tension dissolved, not because I won, but because inner silence ended the outer conflict. Marcus Aurelius called that state peace in the storm, not silence from weakness, but silence born of strength. Modern science has a name for it too. The rest and recovery response, the nervous system returning to balance where clarity replaces chaos. It's in that stillness that you finally hear the voice of reason. Try this tomorrow morning. Before touching your phone, just sit quietly for 5 minutes. No music, no headlines, just your breath. You'll begin to notice a space within you where everything settles, where you don't have to chase any noise anymore. Silence isn't running from the world. It's the art of standing firm within it. In silence, you don't become weaker. You become sharper, wiser, untouchable. As Seneca said, "No one can disturb your peace unless you allow them into your mind." When you learn to sit quietly within yourself, you discover the most powerful weapon Stoicism ever offered humanity, the unshakable calm of a steady soul. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the sweetest compliments are the ones that throw you off the most? Someone tells you, "You're amazing," You're one of a kind. No one could ever replace you, and then just a few minutes later they ask you for a favor you really don't want to do. You smile politely, but inside you feel that tug of war between wanting to please them and wanting to be honest with yourself. That's the quiet power of excessive flattery, the kind of honeyed praise that clouds your judgment. Now don't get me wrong, compliments aren't bad. Who doesn't like to be appreciated? But when praise shows up too often, too vaguely, or right before a request, it's no longer kindness. It's bait. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus once said, "If you wish to be good, first believe that you are bad." It sounds harsh, but what he meant was simple. When you see yourself clearly, no empty praise can blind you. I once taught a student named Emma, a brilliant young designer. One day a client emailed her, "I've never seen anyone as creative as you. You're the only one who could pull this off. And maybe, if possible, could you have it done by Monday for free?" Emma smiled, took a deep breath, and replied, "Thank you, but let's review the scope, the budget, and the deadline." That single calm question, specific and grounded, made all the sweetness evaporate. Because clarity is the antidote to flattery. Marcus Aurelius used to remind himself, "Do not let praise or blame move you away from your true nature." The Stoic doesn't chase compliments because they know real worth doesn't need applause. Modern psychology even backs this up. When your sense of value depends on praise, your brain releases dopamine, a quick hit of pleasure that can turn into dependency. But when you learn to validate yourself, your happiness becomes stable, free, and untouchable. So the next time someone calls you extraordinary, right before asking for something, smile and say, "What exactly do you need from me?" No anger, no coldness, just awareness. Because awareness is the Stoic's shield. They know that genuine compliments are gifts, but conditional ones are chains. Let praise come and go like the breeze. Don't cling to it and don't fear losing it. When you truly know your own worth, no one can buy your obedience with pretty words. Have you ever walked out of a debate feeling like you somehow lost but couldn't explain why? The other person spoke quickly, confidently, throwing around clever words and examples. But when you thought about it later, nothing really added up. That's logical fallacy when words become smoke hiding the truth behind them. The tricky part is people who manipulate with logic never raise their voices. They wear the mask of reason. They deflect, attack your character, or twist your words until you start to doubt yourself. It feels like a battle of intelligence, but really, it's a game of control. Epictetus once warned. When someone only wants to win with words, not seek the truth, it's best to stay silent. Stoics aren't afraid of debate, but they refuse to let reason be twisted into a weapon. Because truth doesn't need to sound smart, it only needs to be clear. I remember once during a meeting a colleague rejected my proposal and said, "But last year, you were wrong about Project X." Classic fallacy attacking the person, not the point. I took a breath and replied, "Maybe I was wrong then, but right now let's talk about the data for this project." The room went silent, because when you return to the point, the smoke of manipulation clears on its own. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If someone shows me I am mistaken, I will gladly change, because I seek truth, not victory." That's the heart of Stoicism. Not to win arguments, but to stay anchored in reality. In today's world where social media news and even everyday conversations overflow with smart-sounding nonsense, this lesson matters more than ever. Investor Warren Buffett once said something profoundly Stoic. "If I can't explain a decision in 3 clear sentences, I won't make it." The wiser you become, the simpler your thinking should be. So next time someone confuses you with words that sound reasonable, pause. take a breath, then ask, what's the conclusion? What's the evidence? If they can't answer, you've already found the truth. It's not logic, it's manipulation. To a Stoic, reason isn't a weapon to defeat others, it's a light to keep from losing yourself. Have you ever felt like your emotions were the ones driving you? A single careless comment ruins your whole day. One cold text keeps you awake all night. We often think our enemies are out there somewhere, but to the Stoics, the real enemy sometimes lives within us, the storm of our own emotions. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "He who conquers himself is mightier than he who conquers a city." That's not just philosophy, it's a strategy for living. The Stoics believed you can't control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond. Anger, anxiety, jealousy, fear, they're all visitors in your mind. You can't stop them from knocking, but you can choose whether to let them in. I remember one morning in New York, stuck in traffic for over an hour on my way to teach. Car horns blared, the driver behind me kept shouting, and I felt my anger boiling up. A natural reaction, right? But then I remembered Epictetus. It's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. So I took a deep breath and watched my anger drift by like smoke in the air. 5 minutes later, it was gone. The traffic was still there, but somehow I was free. Emotional control doesn't mean suppression or pretending you don't feel. It means observing without being swept away, like standing on the shore, watching the waves roll in. You see them, you understand them, but you don't dive in. Modern psychology calls this mindful awareness. When you pause before reacting, your brain literally shifts from the emotional center to the rational one. A few conscious breaths, and you take back control. A friend of mine, a business owner, once said, "It took me years to learn this. I can't run a company if I can't manage my own mood." That's Stoicism in action, mastering the inner world before trying to change the outer one. Try this tomorrow morning. Before your day begins, ask yourself, what could test my patience today, and how would a Stoic respond? That simple question can change everything, because in the end, real freedom doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from no longer letting the world control you. When you master your emotions, you don't just find peace. You become untouchable. Have you ever laughed at a joke that wasn't funny just because everyone else was laughing? Or agreed with something you knew was wrong, just to avoid standing out? If you have, you've felt the power of peer pressure, that invisible force that quietly pulls people away from their true selves. Seneca once said, "What is popular is not always right." The Stoics understood how strong the herd instinct can be. We all crave belonging, to be liked, to fit in. But when belonging costs you your integrity, that's not harmony, it's surrender. I remember a former student of mine, David, now a young tech executive. In a meeting, everyone voted to approve a project he knew was flawed. The easy thing would have been to stay quiet. But he took a breath and said, "I see some risks here we haven't addressed." The room fell silent. Some frowned. But 3 months later, the project collapsed exactly as David had predicted. And from that day on, people didn't just respect him, they trusted him. Marcus Aurelius used to remind himself each morning, "Today I will meet the arrogant, the ungrateful, the selfish. But they cannot make me like them unless I allow it." That's the antidote to our modern fear of standing alone. In the age of social media, the crowd isn't a few people in a room, it's thousands of voices online. If you don't have an inner compass, it's easy to get lost in the noise. Here's a simple Stoic practice. Write down 3 values you'll never compromise: honesty, kindness, discipline, whatever they are. The next time you feel pressured to conform, look at that list. It will remind you that silence isn't always peace, and agreement isn't always truth. Actor Keanu Reeves once said, "I don't want to live in a world where kindness is seen as weakness." He's quiet, different, but deeply respected. Because true strength isn't in blending in, it's in standing tall when you're the only one. The Stoic doesn't rebel against the world, they simply refuse to let the world choose for them. And that's what makes them free. Even in the loudest crowd, they can still hear that quiet, honest voice inside. This is my path. Have you ever been in an argument where someone said, "I didn't want to get angry, but you made me lose control"? Or maybe you've heard, "I'm only upset because of you." Sound familiar? That's emotional blame shifting, one of the most subtle forms of manipulation, where someone makes you believe you're responsible for their moods or behavior. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." The Stoics understood that every reaction is a choice, not a sentence. No one can make you angry, hurt, or jealous. They can only create circumstances. The emotion that follows is yours to allow or refuse, and just as you're not responsible for someone else's feelings, you don't have to carry the weight of their reactions. When someone hands you that burden, you have the right to set it down. I remember a woman named Clara who once attended one of my workshops in Boston. She told me her husband often lost his temper and would say, "If you didn't talk like that, I wouldn't be angry." For years she believed him, until one day she paused, took a deep breath, and said calmly, "I'm sorry if you feel hurt, but your emotions are your choice, not my responsibility." It wasn't defiance, it was a boundary. And you know what? The anger stopped. Not because she won, but because she stopped playing the game of blame. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let others do what they think is right. My only concern is to keep my own mind right." When someone tries to dump their emotions on you, remember it's a reflection of their inner world, not yours. The Stoic sees this like looking into a mirror. They observe, they understand, but they don't take the mirror home. Here's a simple Stoic exercise called the responsibility map. Whenever someone makes you feel guilty, pause and ask, "What's mine and what's not?" Write it down. You'll often discover that most of what's weighing on you doesn't belong to you at all. In modern psychology, this is called emotional boundaries. People who know how to set them tend to be calmer, less anxious, and more authentic, because they understand that compassion doesn't mean carrying someone else's emotions. The Stoic isn't cold. They listen, they care, but they know that empathy should never turn into captivity. They help when they can, but they don't take blame for what they didn't cause. Have you ever noticed? Because, as Epictetus said, focus on what you can control, and you'll find no one can make you a slave in your own soul. So let your kindness be a hand extended, not a back, bent under someone else's burden. And that control doesn't always start with commands, but with isolation. It begins when someone makes you believe they're the only one who truly understands you. They say things like, "Your friends don't really get yes," or "Your family doesn't care about you like I do." At first, it sounds like love, concern, but in truth, it's the first brick in a wall called isolation. Seneca once warned, "Associate with those who will make you better, and welcome those you can make better." He understood that human strength comes not from separation, but from connection. Isolation is the oldest trick in the manipulator's playbook, because once they cut you off from your support system, they become your only source of validation. And from there, power shifts completely. I once met a woman named Sarah during a seminar in Seattle. She told me her partner often said things like, "Your friends are toxic. They're jealous of us. You shouldn't see them anymore." Slowly, she stopped calling her friends, then her family, until one day she realized she had no one left to talk to, no one to remind her that what she was living wasn't normal. That's when she understood. Isolation isn't just about being alone, it's about being cut off from truth. The Stoics knew that healthy relationships keep the mind strong. Even Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, wrote in his journal, "From my father I learned patience, from my mother integrity, from my teachers kindness." He knew no one grows wise in isolation. If you ever notice someone trying to pull you away from the people you love, stop and ask yourself, does this make me stronger or more dependent? That question will tell you everything. A simple Stoic practice. Rebuild your circle of clarity. Connect with friends, family, or mentors you trust. Schedule a call, a dinner, or even write a letter. Because connection is oxygen for the soul. And when you keep those lifelines alive, no one can strangle your freedom. Isolation is the soil where manipulation grows. Connection is the light that destroys it. Protect your genuine relationships. They're the mirrors that remind you who you are, even when someone else tries to make you forget. The Stoic doesn't live apart from the world, they simply choose their company wisely. People who sharpen their reason, not dim their light. And when you keep that circle bright, no one can drag you into the darkness of isolation again. Have you ever tried to make a clear point only for the other person to suddenly change the subject so smoothly that you forget what you were even talking about? You ask a simple question and they bring up your mistake from last year. You try to stay on topic and somehow the whole conversation shifts, leaving you frustrated and confused. That's deflection, a subtle strategy used by those who don't want to face the truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Truth never harmed anyone. Only avoidance of it does." To the Stoics, truth doesn't need to run or hide. When someone dodges it by changing the subject, what they're really doing is protecting their control, because truth is power, and those who fear it often fear losing that power. I remember a situation from a company I once advised. A department head was questioned about overspending the budget. Instead of answering, he smiled and said, "First, I just want to thank everyone for our success this quarter." The room applauded, the tension dropped, and the question disappeared. But then a young employee calmly said, "Thank you, but let's return to the budget. What's the actual number?" Just one clear sentence and the truth returned to the table. Epictetus taught, "When someone tries to pull you off the path of reason, don't follow them. Stand still." That's the Stoic skill coming back to center when others try to drag you to the edges. Truth, like a compass, only works when you're willing to face it directly. Picture this. You're in a heated discussion, and suddenly the other person says, "You know, the fact that you're even saying this shows you don't care about me." Your instinct is to defend yourself, to prove your good intentions. But a Stoic would pause, take a breath, and calmly say, "We can talk about that later. Right now, let's return to the original question. No anger, no defensiveness, just clarity." Psychologists call this the looping technique, gently bringing the conversation back to the central point whenever it drifts. It not only keeps your reasoning intact, but also shows you're not controlled by emotion. In today's world, full of fake news, clever rhetoric, and endless distraction, this lesson matters more than ever. The Stoic doesn't chase every sound or headline. They listen, reflect, and return to the essential question. Where is the truth? Remember, deflection only works when you forget your original goal. But when your mind is steady, calm, focused, unshaken, every illusion fades on its own. Because in the end, as Marcus Aurelius said, the honest man needs few words. He simply stands tall and truth surrounds him. Have you ever sat through a meeting where after 10 minutes your mind started spinning, slide after slide, chart after chart, numbers raining down like a storm? And when someone finally asked, "Do you agree?" you nodded. Not because you understood, but because you were too exhausted to resist. That's information overload, a modern form of manipulation, where people use quantity to hide quality. Epictetus once said, "If something is true, it will stand firm in simplicity." The Stoics believed that truth is always clear. Manipulators, on the other hand, know that confusion is power. If they flood you with enough data, you stop thinking for yourself. They drown you in jargon and selective facts until you give up and say, "Fine, whatever you think." I once witnessed this in a corporate presentation. A team tried to convince investors with a 50-page plan filled with technical language. During Q&A, one older investor leaned back and said calmly, "Summarize this in 3 main points." The room went silent. Everyone glanced at each other. And in that moment, the fog lifted, because truth, if it exists, can always be said simply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if something is beyond your understanding, suspend judgment. That's wise advice in the digital age, where we're bombarded with thousands of bits of news, opinions, and misinformation every single day. The Stoic doesn't try to read it all. They pause, filter, and ask, does this information help me live better? Does it matter to what I'm doing? If the answer is no, they let it go, not out of ignorance, but out of self-discipline. Cognitive scientists call this decision fatigue, when too much information makes our minds less accurate, more tired, and more likely to agree just to end the discomfort. The cure isn't knowing more, it's filtering better. Try this exercise. Whenever you feel overwhelmed, write 3 lines. 1. What's the main issue? 2. What are my options? 3. What are the possible outcomes? If you can't answer those 3 lines, you don't understand the problem yet. And a Stoic never makes decisions in confusion. Remember, knowledge is power, but only when it's clear. Too much information isn't wisdom, it's noise. In today's loud, chaotic world, the strongest person isn't the one who knows everything, but the one who knows when to stop, when to focus, and when to stay silent. As Seneca said, it's not that we have too little time, it's that we waste too much of it on meaningless things. And that's just as true for your time as it is for your peace of mind. Have you ever been pressured to make a decision right now with that sinking feeling that if you don't agree, you'll lose everything? Someone says, if you really cared, you'd do this. Or in business you hear, if you don't sign today, the deal is off. That's an ultimatum, a game built on fear, where someone shrinks your world down to 2 choices. Either they win or you lose. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if it can be endured, endure it. If not, stop complaining. In either case, you are free. That single thought captures the heart of Stoicism. True freedom doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from refusing to let fear control you. I remember a former student, Daniel, a young, ambitious entrepreneur. One day a partner told him, if you don't sign this deal today, I'm walking away. Daniel felt the pressure tighten around him. But instead of rushing, he paused, took a deep breath and said, if that's what you need to do, I respect your choice. But I don't make decisions under pressure. Let's meet again tomorrow morning. The other man went silent. And the next morning, the deal was still on the table with far better terms. Epictetus taught, no one can compel you to act against reason unless you choose fear over wisdom. The Stoics understood that any decision born from fear isn't a choice, it's surrender. They believed in the power of the pause, that small moment between emotion and action where freedom lives. Modern psychology calls this the pause power. When you're cornered, take a slow breath, count to 4, and ask yourself, if I say no, what will really happen? Most of the time, you'll realize the consequences aren't nearly as terrible as they seem, because an ultimatum only works if you believe there's no other way. Stoics don't deny fear, they just refuse to let it steer the ship. They see fear like a passing cloud. They notice it, understand it, but never let it cover the sky. And sometimes one calm sentence, I'll think about it, and get back to you tomorrow is all it takes to escape the trap built out of pressure. Oprah Winfrey once said, "No decision worth anything is made in fear." She understood something the ancient Stoics knew thousands of years ago. Calm is not weakness, it's the highest form of strength. So the next time someone throws an ultimatum your way, remember this. You're not a pawn in their game. You're the one holding the board. And when you choose calm over fear, you're not just making a smart decision, you're living as a truly free person in the spirit of a Stoic soul. In the end, my friend, every form of manipulation, no matter how subtle, can only survive when we lose our inner clarity. A Stoic isn't someone who feels nothing. They're someone who pauses, observes, and chooses their response consciously. They understand that freedom doesn't come from changing others. It comes from mastering oneself. If there's one timeless truth Stoicism offers our modern world, it's this. Slow down, think clearly, and don't let temporary emotions steal lasting peace. Because once your mind is steady, no one, no matter how persuasive, can control you. And if today's message resonated with you, if you want to keep exploring Stoic philosophy not as distant theory, but as a practical art of living, subscribe to the channel. Each week we'll dive deeper into how these ancient lessons can help us live with more clarity, calm, and freedom in a world that often feels overwhelming. Let's build a community grounded in awareness, wisdom, and inner freedom. Because true freedom always begins within.